Chelsea really need a win against Brighton on Saturday, but they face an injury crisis. Hello there guys, Daniel Childs back here again. Welcome back to the show. This is my preview, my team selector, thoughts, feelings and everything in between ahead of Chelsea's clash with Brighton. A 3 p.m. kickoff, what a novelty. I believe this is the first 3 p.m. kickoff we've had at home since we faced Brighton in September of 2024. So basically a year since the last one. That's how rare they are, a very rare commodity. This is a big game, I think, for Chelsea. I think the mood currently is one of negativity, or at least concern about Chelsea's recent performances. But the conflict for Enzo Maresca is when he needs a big performance, he's going to have to do it without some key players because the injury list continues to pile up following the Club World Cup. I know a lot of people have very easily linked it to the Club World Cup, whether it's, is it correlation, causation? We're not entirely sure at the moment, but what we do know is Maresca has some real tricky selection issues, especially from a defensive point of view, following the reveal of some of these injury issues that we didn't expect in his press conference. As we do on every preview, we're going to look at Enzo Maresca's press conference, we're going to look at Brighton, and I will give you my predicted 11. And as in a slight kind of positive way, as I like to say, obstacles can also be opportunities. We'll reflect on that in my predicted 11. Want to hear you guys in the comments below. Get involved. Give me your predicted lineups and thoughts ahead of this game. Tactically, what do you think are going to be the big battles? Who do you think from a Chelsea point of view could really make a difference when Chelsea need a victory? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, share this content around with friends. If you're listening on the podcast, thank you for tuning in that way as well. And please do rate and review the podcast if you're enjoying it, so we can make this a bigger and better community as we try and hit 40k subs on YouTube before the end of 2025. So not a great press conference. It really wasn't. I saw some discourse around like press conferences and questions and all of that, but this press conference was dominated by one thing, and that was injury news. We knew that Cole Palmer wasn't going to be available, and it seems like he's being managed. And the good thing is, although we won't see him until after the October international break, kind of a very similar situation we found ourselves in before the September international break. No surgery, at least at the current moment. So at least that's some positive, but obviously not having him for some big games is of great frustration. What compounded this, Tosin Adarabioyo out with a calf injury. Wesley Fofana suffered a concussion, I assume in the collision with Philip Jorgensen against Lincoln. You add that onto Dario Asugo, Liam Delap, and both Lavia and Badiashile still not ready. So that leaves at least 7 players out. And I say at least because we may get a nasty surprise by the time team news hits on Saturday afternoon, because we've seen players drop out of squads because of illness. So you're never quite sure, but that of course limits things and is of some concern ahead of a game that Chelsea really do need not just a win, that's the most important thing, but a convincing performance, and how Maresca can rally the troops really ahead of an important week before we do hit that October international break, where hopefully some of these players can recover before we return. Let's take a look at Brighton. Whether you call this the Rob Sanchez, the Motka Correa, the Moises Caicedo, the João Pedro derby, it's a game that at times has some hostility. I mean, it doesn't really rank anywhere close to the more sort of hostile games we face in a season, but there obviously is the narrative. In some ways, you kind of look at this Brighton team and think, who will Chelsea be signing in a year's time? And obviously we know Buonanotte can't play because he's on loan from Brighton. It's been a mixed start to Fabian Hurtzler's second season. He had a really strong start last season, and it was around the time they faced Chelsea where things started to go a little bit pear-shaped, and Chelsea, I think, really exploited Brighton. And I think when you come up against Brighton, they're one of the few teams outside the top 4, top 6, who are going to come to the Bridge and probably pose a more attacking stance and kind of go at Chelsea a bit more than other teams do, which, can be a double-edged sword, right? Like, although I think in some ways that offers opportunity and space that Chelsea don't usually get, and that's kind of a frustration at the Bridge as we face low blocks and we really find it difficult to break them down. When you have a team that presses you, and as Chelsea have shown in the past week, they're not very good from the start of a game of, being sluggish, making individual errors. The team can pounce on that and have attacking quality. I think the player for me that stands out is Yakuba Minta. Although he isn't their top goal scorer, if you look at some of the numbers, he's second for XG so far. top for XG on target, expected assists per 90, successful dribbles per 90. So he really is a player, and I think CFC Central did some great analysis about this in terms of his ability to get in beyond defences. And when we look at how Chelsea have been exploited over the past couple of weeks, yeah, it's been self-implosion, like, really unenforced errors and us just giving the ball away in really bad areas, but as well, teams finding space in behind our defence, sometimes literally a simple ball over the top. So when you've got the speed of Minter, when you've got Matoma, who's obviously had joy at Stamford Bridge and also the Amex against Chelsea, Gruder has been their top goal scorer so far this season. I think Rutter up top is a decent striker as well. They have talented players. It sometimes is hard to know if you're going to get a convincing performance by Brighton and defensively whether they're going to be exposed. Because that is one of the areas I would be looking at from a Chelsea point of view, because it's where they really dominated last year against Brighton and kind of allowed Brighton to come onto them and then really hit them on transition. So I wonder if that's kind of a way Maresca is looking at this game, and whether that's where Chelsea can get joy. In the league form, they're 14th. They've been very mixed. In the League Cup, they've dominated both Oxford and in midweek scored some great goals against Barnsley. But in the league, they've lost both of their away Premier League games so far against Everton and also Bournemouth. So on the road, haven't been as strong as they have been where they've obviously beat Man City a few weeks ago at the Amex. So I think for Chelsea, in some ways, it's not the easiest opponent, but in other ways, I think tactically, I look at Brighton as a team that if Chelsea are in a mood and an ability to pounce on errors that Brighton will make, because they do play a riskier style of football. They're not a low block team. They never really have been. And although in possession, they're not as dominant as they once were, like when you compare them to De Zerbi, when you compare them to when Potter was manager, they're not dominating possession. It's not as kind of dominant on kind of positional play, but they are still a progressive-minded team, an attack-minded team, and I don't think that's going to change. And again, why there is maybe room for Chelsea to really enjoy themselves compared to other weeks where Chelsea have really struggled. Compared to Brentford, I think it's kind of sliding scales really in terms of the sort of team you're coming up against. So let's look at Chelsea and their starting 11. Kind of a bit restricted with some of those injury problems, right? You kind of are, I mean, unless there's real shocks, like limited by some of your options. Rob Sanchez will return in goal. Rob Sanchez, we hope, is the Rob Sanchez of Bayern Munich rather than the Rob Sanchez of Man United. And to be fair, the Rob Sanchez we've seen for a longer stretch of time now. But he is always prone, as he was in this fixture last year, to make some real blunders, which is of some concern. But he needs to return to form, because if we watched Philip Jorgensen, if any of you watched, I'm sure all of us did, in horror, Philip Jorgensen, I mean, that is what is there if Sanchez is unavailable again. So that makes it some concern to our goalkeeping options. It's difficult to know, right, because in a counter-attacking game, there is maybe an argument with an intense game that you start Malo Gusto and you kind of do what we did against PSG, right? Like, you do the Malo Gusto as a wing-back, Reece James maybe in central midfield, maybe even Reece James with the idea of limited defensive options at the moment. You maybe even play him in a back two that then morphs into a back three. And the passing from deep of Reece James can really be instrumental. And because of the limited options, I do wonder whether James will be played in central midfield in this game. I wouldn't be stunned if that's one route Maresca takes. I'm going to start Reece James as right back. I think some of the passes he can make and also some of the crosses he played later on in the game at Old Trafford in a very bleak day. It was probably one of the few positives where, I mean, he was at fault from a defensive aspect, as many players have been, but from a creative aspect, we started to see Reece pick up positions that we all love to see him in. And I just think because it's a big game, he's the captain, it's a game we need to be winning and really get ourselves back on track in this season, I think Reece will start. That then leaves us with both Josh Achimpong and I think Trevor Chalobah starting here. Trev hasn't been in his best form. He's made some horrendous errors. But him and Josh Achimpong, this would be his first start since the opening game against Crystal Palace where he kept a clean sheet. I mean, for Josh, it really could, I speak about obstacles, being opportunities. This is maybe a path opening for him because you don't know how long it's going to take some of the other players to return from injury, even after the October international break. And I think that for Josh, this is a great opportunity for him to take the breakthrough chance that was always there for him when we didn't sign someone new. So I hope Josh can really take this opportunity. And so can Trev in terms of being able to reassert himself. Because he's had some good performances this season. It's been a rocky week for Chelsea and it's been a really rocky week for him. he needs to respond quickly, and I think he can. Marco Correa, obviously, a left back. Let's hope he can contribute a bit more in attack than he has in recent weeks. Midfield, Moises Caicedo, we know is going to start this game. But I do think now, if Andre Santos does not start this game and Chelsea have a negative result, I think it will be one of those moments where people turn around and go like, Maresca, what are you doing, mate? Because Enzo Fernandez has been really poor in the past week or so. I'm not saying he's been poor in every single game. He played really well against West Ham. He had some, he literally set up a goal and scored a goal against Fulham, although his overall performance I don't think was great. Fernandez just hasn't been at the races, and I'm concerned about that. And Andre Santos is there. This is why we have Andre Santos in the squad. And I think in a game where you're concerned about your defensive options and you want some more security, you want some more mobility, you want some more athleticism in central midfield, and you're concerned about Fernandez not looking that great, Santos, this is the opportunity for him. And I think he should be starting this game. And it could be a sliding doors moment where he really asserts himself as a first choice option in the Premier League for Chelsea, especially next week against Liverpool. Like, he could play so well that he asserts himself as a starter in that game, which is pretty big. Then we get into the attack, right? Again, limited options. You can't play Buonanotte. You don't have Cole Palmer. So I was speaking to Louis about this, and he was quite adamant that he'd like to see Mark Guiu play. And the reason he said about that, like in terms of just integrating Mark Guiu, but also having a focal point that then means that João Pedro could drop deeper. Still not entirely sure that's what's going to happen. I think what Maresca said about giving him minutes, to me that just sounds like off the bench potentially. Until I see Mark Guiu start a game, I'm not going to be predicting him starting a game, because so far since he's returned, I know he's had some injury issues on knocks and stuff, but the way they completely overlooked the fact that he could have played against Lincoln, I think is a bit of a red flag if I'm Mark Guiu. So I'm going to go with Pedro Neto off the right. I'm going to go Esteval in the centre. This is quite exciting. And again, like, the madness of injuries, the frustration of injuries opens up opportunities for players to play in positions where maybe they wouldn't always get them. And Esteval, I think, can play that central role. And I think it's quite exciting to see what he could do with that kind of role and the freedom to move right and left. And Esteval, it's frustrating, right? Because he got taken off so early against Man United. He didn't start the Lincoln game. He came off the bench. Again, a great opportunity for Esteval to start off, hopefully, what is a positive week. And I think he will be instrumental if Chelsea have a good performance. And thinking about on the counter or the space that could be there for him against this Brighton team, I really hope Esteval brings a lot of joy to Chelsea tomorrow. Left, I'm not entirely sure left wing. I'm going to go with Alejandro Garnacho. I think that Garnacho, this is a great opportunity for him to potentially start to stake a claim for a first choice. Gittins hasn't convinced. Garnacho didn't have a good performance against Lincoln. Let's just be honest about that. But this is the first, I think, serious look at Garnacho at Stamford Bridge. Start him in this game. Off the ball runs. Again, if Brighton are deciding to play a high line, that could be very damaging for them and could be a great opportunity for Garnacho to find space and to prove himself good enough to start more games. Again, you've got to have a situation where if Palmer isn't available and other players aren't available, other players have to turn up, other players have to step up. And this is a chance potentially for Garnacho to take that opportunity on an important day for Chelsea, which means then João Pedro starts. You've got to keep playing João Pedro, and I'm not quite of the belief that he isn't a striker. I just think he's a versatile player. The stats tell you he is influential for Chelsea. I think with the exception of last week against Man United, which is a little bit weird because of the circumstance of that game and how quickly it changed and us being down to 10 men and then taking off like two wide players, which left Pedro isolated, would left any player isolated. And I believe the Crystal Palace game. I think every other game he's been involved with, he's either scored or assisted. You have to keep that player in the team. And to me, it's just about versatility. It's just about the freedom that he can play a little bit deeper if you want him to. And he can rotate with Esteval potentially in the game and them growing a connection along with other players. And against Brighton, against his former club, I'm sure he'll be getting booed as others will in our team from the Brighton away end. Hopefully he can keep scoring and quickly reassert himself as one of our best parts of the summer, really, because that's what he was. And I think that, again, he's going to be quite a big player. And he kind of has to be at the moment with Palmer not there. So there we go. That is my starting 11. Please do give me yours in the comments below. I'm really intrigued to see what you have to say ahead of this game. We'll be reacting to whatever happens at the bridge. Go and check out the Chelsea Echo. Go and check out my Substack for some FPL amateur stuff from myself, my FPL amateur series about the Paul Ganaville head-to-head league. Go and support the Paul Ganaville Foundation. Link is in the description box below for all of my other work, and I'll see you again very, very soon. All the best.